I remember the exact moment the sea took me because it separated my life into before and after. One careless step on a black glassy patch of ice, a half-second of weightless surprise, and then the drop. The Bering Sea didn't feel like water. It felt like a live wire. Cold didn't sting. It seized. It clamped down on the lungs, turned hands into clumsy props, and tried to convince the mind to panic. I knew the rules from training. Control the breath for 60 seconds, then you get 10 minutes of useful hands, maybe an hour of consciousness if the gods are kind. Numbers are something to hold on to when the world goes white. A life ring hit the water a few feet away, a pale halo with a tail of rope that swung like a comet. I hooked it with my forearms, not my fingers, and let my chest sag into it. The deck light on the trawler became a distant town across bad weather, then a star, then just a direction. The engines thundered as the skipper fought to keep the hull from icing over. The crew did what they could. But every wave between us was a moving hill, and every hill pushed me backward. I stopped trying to make the boat make sense. The sea had its own grammar. My job was simpler: stay above the line where breath still worked. I made the world small. Inhale for 4, hold for 1, exhale for 8, repeat, count the sets, don't shout, don't drink the sea, don't thrash. The cold will burn through whatever you have left if you argue with it. A tall swell lifted me and dropped me like a box, and in that brief high place I saw a pale, pitted slab, old sea ice, thick and weary, drifting like a slow animal. The sight arrived without drama and felt like someone had put a floor back under me. I aimed for it, kicked slowly, and let the ring do most of the work. The first attempt to climb onto the ice was foolish. I lunged at it and slid off as if it were glassed with oil. The second try was deliberate. Elbow over edge, forearm flat, hip against, then the ugliest roll of my life. Wet clothes turned into anchors. When I finally flopped onto the surface, I didn't celebrate. I lay still and counted to 60 with my face against salt-crusted ice. The wind felt like a saw. Somewhere in the belly of the floe an old air pocket popped and the sound traveled through my ribs. I cut slits along the cuffs and ankles of my gear to let water drain. Maybe it helped. Maybe it just gave the hands a job. The boat's lights disappeared behind a ridge of still water, then reappeared smaller. I told myself a truth I didn't want. I wasn't getting back onto that deck. If I lived, they would find me. If I died, they would find the ring. Either way, the boat was not my plan anymore. Night descended like a lid. The sky closed down to a low, fast ceiling. I carved a shallow trench in the ice with the heel of my boot, something to break the wind across my chest. I arranged myself the way you store a thing you hope to use later, hands tucked against femoral arteries, elbows sheltering the ribs, spine aligned to the slow tilt of the flow. Shivering came, violent and useful. I welcomed it as proof the pilot light was still lit. I promised myself simple rules: don't stand, don't crawl to the edge, don't close your eyes longer than 5 breaths. Hours have strange lengths when you are cold. Some take a minute and last a year. Some take a year and last a minute. Sometime after midnight, breath that wasn't mine entered the night, not wind. The slow exhale of something that had learned patience long before I was born. A shape materialized at the edge of the floe, young, tall, pale. The nose lifted. The air told it everything. Polar bears are not villains and not teddy bears. They are decisions wrapped in fur. This one studied me the way a locksmith studies a door. I made myself smaller, uninteresting, not worth a wet paw and a broken tooth. He circled once, downwind, read the truth: salt, rubber, chemical, trouble, and slid away into the dark so casually it felt like mercy. Dawn came without color. The world was graphite and breath. I melted snow inside the fold of my base layer for water, keeping the cotton away from skin, letting the heat of the body do the work. Each sip tasted like copper and patience. Dehydration is a quiet thief in the cold. It moves in while you're busy with bigger enemies. I rationed a rhythm. 3 sips, rest, 3 more, later. Hunger arrived as a gentle ache behind the teeth. Food would be a problem for tomorrow's version of me. Today belonged to heat and wind. Midday brought a rumor of rescue. Far away, a helicopter's thump rattled the sky. I stood too fast, arms wide, ring rope trailing, and the floe lurched. The sound slid behind a squall line and the silence that followed felt like scorn. I sat back down, filed the lesson, movement wastes heat and courage, and deepened the trench with numb stubbornness. The wind rose and repatterned the surface with a spray of crystals. I turned my cheekbones into the collar and tried to imagine each breath traveling where it needed to go. The first night ended without ceremony, and the second began with an argument inside the ice itself. A sharp crack snapped through the floe like a high, angry wire. A seam opened 2 feet from my trench. Black water rushed up, hissed, and withdrew. The floe flexed like a living chest. I slid toward thicker mass, spread my arms to widen the load, and kept my weight low. The seam widened to the length of my body, paused, and then relaxed. 2 new floes met and nudged each other like old adversaries who had remembered their better manners. I learned a new rule: when the ice argues, you stay quiet and let it finish. That night I didn't sleep so much as stitch together thin patches of absence. 30 seconds here, a minute there, each bracketed by checks, seam intact, rope within reach, knife lanyard on the wrist, ring under the forearm so it couldn't slide away. Hypothermia isn't dramatic from the inside. It's the narrowing of choices until you either take the next correct one or you welcome the wrong comfort. A strange kindness entered my thoughts and tried to negotiate. You could close your eyes for a proper hour. You could imagine a warm room. You could stand and stretch. I treated that voice the way you treat a salesman who wants you to sign something while you're hungry. I thanked it and did not sign. When morning finally manufactured a little light, the wind had drifted down, and the swell found an unkind rhythm I could predict. A pair of gulls wrote messy circles in the low sky. Their ordinary argument was a relief. I needed calories, not to power a sprint but to pay the toll of being alive. Near the downwind edge, a ribbon of slush thickened and flashed silver beneath. I tied my knife to the ring rope, jigged it clumsily, and offered the sea my ridiculous lure. Luck is not a strategy, but it visits the stubborn. A capelin shot onto the ice, furious at everything. I pinned it with my palm, whispered gratitude to no one in particular, and ate it raw. It tasted like a nickel held too long in the mouth. It was not enough, and it was exactly enough. By midday, the sky brightened behind a band of cloud, and a distant engine note announced a fixed-wing search plane. It passed too high and too far to mean anything. I waved anyway, small arcs made deliberate to conserve. The plane stitched the horizon and was gone. Hope is heavy when it lands, and heavier when it leaves. I refused the weight and made a different list. Move little, drink when you should, keep the hands under the jacket, flex the toes, loosen the boots without letting them go slack, watch the wind for a change in character. In the afternoon the floe drifted into a field of younger ice, plates like dinnerware colliding and chiming. Each contact made a brittle music that should have been pretty and was not. The slabs corrugated around me. A wrong nudge could have flipped my little island. I crawled on my belly to a thicker hummock at the center and locked my elbows into 2 old melt holes. Imagine a man hugging a cold, heavy animal so it won't roll him off its back. That's what I was. The second night carried a different kind of cold, the kind that moves into joints and tries to sign a long lease. Fingers swelled into paw shapes in the gloves. Jaw muscles clenched until the molars ached, so I tucked a sleeve cuff between the teeth to soften the noise. Thoughts blurred into edits. I began to see a dock where none existed, a porchlight anchored to nothing, a handrail that was only wind. I managed those tricks by building routines around them. Every time a kind illusion appeared, I named 3 true things: ice under chest, rope under arm, knife on wrist, truth, truth, truth. The lies blew away like spindrift. Before dawn, weather arrived with a mean heart. The wind punched from a new direction, gusts with edges. I smelled snow the way you smell iron. The floe rose and fell in short, steep jerks. Spray froze where it landed and turned the surface to treachery over treachery. I threaded the ring rope around my waist and over a shoulder to make a poor man's belt, not for heroics, but to keep the ring committed to me. When a wave slapped hard and left a skin of ice on my jacket, I scraped it off with the knife spine and stored the flakes in the fold of fabric under my arm to melt later. Every move took a committee meeting in the body to approve. With daylight the storm didn't settle, it organized. Snow came in ragged sheets that erased the horizon. For a while I lived in a snow globe someone mean kept shaking. I drank the melted spray water, 3 sips at a time, and talked to my hands without words. Just the kind of attention you give a skittish animal. A dark form surfaced 50 yards off, walrus, massive, indifferent. It looked at me with the authority of a thing that never fears weather and then slid under like a moving hill. Even indifference was company. When the snow eased, the world had been rearranged. The young ice had crowded the edges of my floe, and a pressure ridge had risen near the far side, blocks tilted and pressed together into something that looked like a ruined staircase. That ridge could be blessing or trap. Thicker ice meant mass meant stability. But stacked ice can break without manners. I spent an hour watching it, counting the intervals between groans, learning its mood. In the field of complications, even a mood is data. Afternoon brought a brief, fragile gift, a low, pale sun, the kind that doesn't warm but dries. I opened my jacket for 2 minutes, just enough to let vapor out and not enough to welcome the wind. I laid my gloves flat against my stomach under the base layer for half a minute each to bully a little feeling back into the fingers. When the sun slid behind cloud again, it left behind 3 dry patches on the jacket and the simple relief of having done one thing right. On the second evening, hunger sharpened into a bright interest in smells I normally ignore. The faint fish tang rising from slush, the clean iron of snow, the plastic ghost of my own gear. I wasn't starving in the dramatic sense, I was paying small, relentless bills. I used a shard of ice as a scoop, shaved chips from a piece of older bluish ice, less salty, sweeter, and melted those instead of new snow. The taste was different, like rain remembered from a childhood roof. Night 3 began as a negotiation and ended as a test. A willowaw blew through, cat's paw winds that fall off the cliffs along this coast and sprint across water like thieves. The floe tilted 20 degrees and held there, so the trench became an awkward shelf and my body a precarious piece of cargo. I slid until my shoulder jammed against a hummock and stayed there, face sideways, counting the seconds inside each gust. 10, rest, 12, rest, 15, rest. When the willywaw spent itself, the roar retreated as if embarrassed. The floe settled flat. I was still there. Survival is often nothing more heroic than outweighting a bad personality. Sometime in the small hour, a sound like distant thunder rolled under me. It wasn't weather, it was the voice of larger ice meeting larger ice. The field was squeezing, the big plates negotiating boundaries with poor tempers. The pressure wave reached my floe and the edges climbed imperceptibly, then dropped, then climbed again. I slid to the center and went back to my stubborn animal shape, arms wide, hips low, a promise to the mass that I would not do anything sudden. When the wave passed, I allowed 20 seconds of blankness and then brought myself back with the ritual: name, where, plan, say it and mean it, keep the lights on. Dawn of the third day arrived cleaner. The air had that rinsed, bright quality the world wears after it has argued with itself all night. Gulls argued overhead again. I drank careful water. The hunger was still there, less an empty stomach than an empty room somewhere deep. I pulled at a knot of rope for something like work. The knot came free and revealed 6 inches of cord I hadn't used. I braided a loop, tied the knife more securely, and felt the foolish pride of a man who has made something slightly better. Late morning delivered my second piece of luck and the ticket I almost failed to cash. Far west, a distinct smudge against the sky resolved into orange and white. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. Not at first. I watched the angle, the speed, the way the nose hunted. Then I brought the knife up and flashed the blade toward the low sun, short, deliberate tilts, on, off, on, off. The helicopter banked. It became larger not in the hope hallucination way but in the way of geometry and fuel. I stood then, legs braced at shoulder width, ring rope snug, arms high with slow arcs. The machine paused above a lane of water and held station. The door opened, color moved within. I kept waving. If I had been told to describe joy without using any of the usual words, I would have described that particular bank of rotor wash imprinting itself on the surface of the water. A rescue swimmer came down on a cable, a bright figure who did not belong to the same physics as the rest of us. He hit the water and swam as if it were merely complicated air. He reached the edge of my flow with a practiced ease that felt like a gentle rebuke to the clumsy way I'd been managing the elements. He said my name through his mask. Hearing it felt like a hand finding my shoulder from a very long way off. He told me not to move. That instruction was the finest luxury I had been offered in 72 hours. He placed a strap under my arms, clipped a thing to a thing, signaled, and the sky took me. The ice let go without comment. From above, my floe looked smaller than any story I could tell about it. The field around it looked like a broken plate someone had been too sad to throw away. The swimmer rose beside me and gave me a nod that said work was done and work was worth it. Inside the helicopter, human heat felt indecent. They put foil around me, blew air into my gloves, wrapped a cuff around my arm. Numbers were spoken into radios. Questions were asked gently and answered simply. Where from? How long? Pain level? Name? I kept supplying proof that I belonged to a world that uses names and numbers. Later, in a quiet room with beeps too soft to be noticed by anyone not recently returned from the sea, a nurse told me about toes and tissue and timelines. 2 nails would go and come back strange. The pad of my left thumb might never feel a coin properly again. These were fair taxes. My body began to reoccupy itself, fingers prickling with painful pins, core warming, jaw unclenching into an ordinary ache. People want from me a sentence that can be put on a poster above a mountain, something clean about grit or fate. I can offer only what I know. Luck matters, preparation matters. Neither one is a promise. The ocean is not a metaphor and not an enemy. It simply is. It rewards practical decisions and punishes speeches. In the cold, decisions are calories. Climb now, breathe slower, vent the gear, don't stand when the wind argues, melt old ice not new snow, protect the core, be boring on purpose, and pay attention for longer than comfort suggests. Also this, you are attached to other people even when you cannot see the line. Sometimes that line hums in a way instruments can't measure, and sometimes it lowers a swimmer out of the sky and asks you to let go of the ice. If I close my eyes now, memory is a tidy drawer I can open without breaking. I can feel the exact sandpaper of salt on that floe under my chest. I can taste the metallic thinness of melted spray. I can hear the bear's polite breath and the ugly music of plates grinding. I can see the helicopter's nose dip, the door slide, the deliberate movements of people who practice saving. I can place my hand on the quiet railing of a hospital bed and find the pulse in my own wrist with the same surprise as the first time I ever looked out over water and wanted more of it. They said I was out there for 3 days. It felt like an hour and like a season. It began with a slip and ended with a strap, and in between was a long argument with the elements and with the part of myself that wanted to negotiate a soft exit. I did not make speeches to the sky. I did not learn secret meanings. I learned how to count again. 4 in, 8 out, 100 decisions, none dramatic alone, all of them sufficient taken together. If the story means anything, it means this. Do the next correct small thing, then the next. Keep the light in the chest from going out. When the rotor wash wrinkles the water near you, keep your arms moving in big slow arcs so the people looking can see the human shape and say, there, that one, bring him home.